we're going to explore this fantasy and nightmares, this pain and pleasure that drives very much our behavior. So, what is happening when we seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain? Are we driven by the fantasy and trying to avoid the nightmare? Well, let me explain. So, what's happening is it's very much this pain and pleasure inseparable. Um, but however, our brain likes to separate them in order to keep us alive. So, if you think about survival, we're very much pleasure orientated to seek things that we desire for survival. And so we seek our basic needs, we seek shelter, we seek food, and we seek to reproduce to keep the human species alive. They're very much survival mechanisms that we're seeking in order to stay alive, in essence. However, I want you to thrive as joyful mate listeners. So we need to, yes, we need to survive, but we want to be constantly looking at how to thrive on a regular basis. We want to essentially evolve our thinking and get out of the survival thinking. We don't want to get stuck there because otherwise we're constantly seeking pleasure, but then we keep running into pain and we're thinking, oh, the world's unfair. I'm seeking this, like I'm seeking to enjoy lots of food. But as you know, when you overindulge in food, then you're mindful that you're overdoing it. You'll affect your digestion. You'll feel yucky afterwards. And then you'll be thinking, oh, I need to do more exercise or I need to work this excess calories off or something like that. And so the way the world is, I guess, not designed, but created, or how it's evolved is very much in conservation. So everything is there. There's nothing missing. It's there in the moment, complete and whole. However, our animal brain likes to separate it in order to drive our behavior towards survival. So we're driven to chase prey. We're driven to chase the opposite sex, or in some people, it's the same sex, but we're driven by that pleasure seeking mechanism to reproduce. We're driven by the survival mechanism to, I guess, eat food, to make sure we nourish ourselves to stay alive. And so we have these very much these desires that we seek. However, at any moment, they're also entangled with the opposite, the complementary opposite. So when we're seeking pleasure, there is also the opposite there in the moment, which is often referred to as pain. So pain and pleasure are inseparable. However, we're led by this delusion or illusion that they are separate when we're in our animal thinking. However, when we're in our thrival thinking, we know they're inseparable. They come together. They're complementary opposites and they're always together, entangled and complete. However, it's up to us whether we look for the complementary opposite in the moment or whether we choose to block it out and to think we can live by fantasy and thinking that the world's just one sided and everything should be pleasurable. That is an absolute fantasy. And that will often return your nightmare, which is that there is pain and there is what we sometimes label as suffering. It's always entangled there. So, for example, when you do exercise, often exercise can be at the time of doing it is, you feel the pain. You feel that it's hurting you. You're out of breath. However, at the same time, you know that you'll feel better afterwards. And so you're, wanting the after effect, however, not wanting to endure the pain and suffering to experience the after effect. And so we think, yeah, I like exercise, but I don't like exercise. Well, if you accept the fact that it's always whole and complete and that pain and pleasure are inseparable, then you'll embrace exercise for as it is. It has pain and pleasure together. It's the same as good food or food that you want to indulge in. Yes, it tastes brilliant, but the more you eat of it, the less it tastes brilliant. So you have that normalization effect, and you need to eat more in order to get the same desired effect. And so, yes, you're experiencing a bit of pleasure to begin with, but then you keep eating it. The pleasure isn't as elevated or as rewarding. However, you keep eating it thinking that you'll get that same amount of pleasure. However, you start to feel the pain of indigestion, the pain of thinking, oh, I'm overeating, I'm going to put on weight, I'm going to have to exercise more tomorrow. And that is in itself, the thought of that is painful. And so that's your nightmare, but it's entangled with the fantasy that you have that you can eat as much as you want, and overindulge. So when we combine the two together, we have more moderate behavior because you can see both sides. You can see that they're completely inseparable, they're completely entangled. And when you accept that fact, the law of conservation, then you'll realize I'm going to take a more moderate approach. I'm going to, yes, enjoy a little bit, but I'm not going to overindulge because the overindulgence takes away the ultimate pleasure. So if you find that middle road, you'll find a nice balance between the, I guess, enjoying and being more satisfied and grateful for life as it is, as opposed to chasing fantasies and trying to run away from nightmares, because that's not possible. That is the source of all human suffering, according to Buddhism, is trying to avoid pain and constantly seek pleasure is the root of all suffering. So if you want to continue that thinking, then yes, you'll be frustrated, right? You'll get irritable and you'll think life is unfair. However, if you embrace the wholeness and embrace the fact that pain and pleasure are inseparable and they're entangled together and they're complete and whole in any given moment, then you'll take a more moderate approach to life. For example, you will witness anyone that does extreme exercise will also do the extreme in to counterbalance their thinking. Well, it creates a licensing effect. So they do extreme amounts of exercise and then they think, well, I deserve lots of treats. I deserve to overeat. I deserve to binge anything, right? Whether it be alcohol, drugs, or food, because they work so hard, right? And so that mentality actually creates the swing towards the other side. So, which is the opposite behavior to what they're doing. So they go from extreme health to extremely unhealthy, and they swing between those two poles and often get frustrated. And because they're just swinging all the time, and there's no middle ground to embrace and to accept. As the middle ground is just as it is, perfect. It's whole and complete. And yeah, so you don't need to extremely exercise. And any type of extreme behavior will drive the opposite behavior through the licensing effect, because you are worthy, you deserve it, because you work so hard, you train so hard, so therefore you deserve an extra ice cream and maybe a extra scoop and maybe a super indulgence, and maybe just do it all again, because you have earned the licensing effect. So the takeaway message here is to look for both sides in any given moment. So if you're seeing all up, then look at what isn't up. It's what's the opposite? It's down. What's the downside? How is it not serving you? How is it impacting you, as opposed to just thinking it's all up? Because nothing is all up or nothing is all down. It is completely balanced in the moment, there and then. And we have this delusional effect when we jump into survival mode that they're separable. And that obviously drives extreme behavior and drives urges to do extreme things. But essentially, you're chasing fantasies and running away from nightmares. And ultimately, that life is very frustrating, because at the end of the day, you're constantly just swinging from one pole to another and never really satisfied. Satisfaction will come when you accept the wholeness, when you accept that pain and pleasure are inseparable and they're always entangled. Once you accept that, you've embraced the middle road. the middle ground, the more moderate behavior that doesn't require any extremism. And you can just be you, the most authentic self. And that is the best journey to go on, is amplifying who you are, amplifying the the beauty within you, the superpowers within you, and accepting obviously the other side that might not be so beneficial or might not be perceived as beneficial from yourself or someone else. However, as you are complete and whole, embrace the wholeness of who you are, see the ups and downs together, totally entangled, and you'll have this more moderate view of life. You'll live more authentically, and you will embrace the wholeness of life as it is. You'll see more gratitude, and you'll also experience more love. So embrace wholeness of life. Always realize that there's the entanglement of complementary opposites such as pain and pleasure, and that they're inseparable, and that you are perfect as you are, and continue to exemplify who you are to the world. If you'd like help in terms of how to see the world this way, please reach out to me. I'm here to help you master your mind. Reach out to me, click on the link in the show notes, and you can book a free session with me to see how I could help you thrive in this world we live in. So for now, continue to go on your joyful journey.